So today we're just gonna have like super casual conversation about dating, which is something that I have talked about before, but I don't know, maybe this one might be more like personal because I got a couple stories for y'all. So from the very beginning of me moving into a car, I don't even know when the thought of like, how does this, okay, that's the thing. I never thought, how does this affect my dating life? And I knew that obviously people would have preconceived notions about that and probably be a little skeptical, and you know, maybe someone wouldn't want to date you because you live in a car, and like that's understandable, you know, and that kind of just comes with the territory. I'm talking about like, you move past all of that. If someone does want to get to know you and they are interested in dating you, like the dynamic of how it would actually work, I never thought it was any different than a long distance relationship. The only difference being that like I wouldn't be in the same place all the time. I would just be different places. There have definitely been some instances where dating is affected because of the life that I live. I mean, I think that's kind of a given. So frequently I get asked if it's an issue and if other people have a problem with it. And there was one time where I was dating somebody. So I'd been living a mobile lifestyle as far as like vehicle dwelling and traveling, all of that, before we started dating. And that was like a conversation we had at the beginning. Like, hey, this is my life, this is kind of like how it goes, this is what I do, are you okay with that? And the answer was yes. So fast forward a little ways down the line, and I think ultimately it was just, it didn't necessarily have to do with the van, like living in a van. It's not like they thought that was weird or gross or, you know, irresponsible or whatever. It was definitely more like the travel aspect, because it kind of just got to this place where they would really wanted me to be where they were all of the time. Like, they basically wanted me to move to a city and like be there. And that just wasn't my plan. I don't know. I don't know how else to put that. And again, like, even though we had the conversation in the beginning of this is kind of my lifestyle and whatever, I think a lot of it is that this person thought that they would be okay with it, then because they had never actually tried it. I don't think they'd ever had a long distance relationship before, and I hadn't either. So, you know, sometimes things sound easier than they actually are. And so I think this person went into it with like good intentions, and they were kind of on board with the whole lifestyle as it was, and then experiencing it, I think they kind of just changed their mind. I think like the hardest part about that whole thing is that, you know, when you have a long distance relationship, it's usually like one person has to be somewhere and the other person has to be somewhere else, and that is why there is distance between you. In this case, they had to be somewhere specific for a long period of time. Me, on the other hand, I was kind of free to roam around. So I think that was something that was really hard for them to kind of understand, like where I was coming from, because they just see it as like, well, you don't have to be anywhere, so like you could be here. It's almost like I was the reason that we were in a long distance relationship. Like there really didn't have to be any distance at all, like have to, you know, because it wasn't like I was in school or I was working a job or anything like that. And I guess like I was the person creating the distance. However, I wasn't personally at a place in my life where I was going to choose a relationship over my lifestyle, because I would have to change my lifestyle if I had wanted the relationship to grow. So I think the other person maybe felt undervalued to a certain degree, which again is understandable, because it's like, well, if you enjoy dating me and you want our relationship to continue and to grow and whatever, then wouldn't you want to be where I am all the time? And it wasn't that I didn't care about this person, because I did, and I did a lot, but I also cared about my lifestyle too, because I had worked really hard to be able to have the flexibility to travel the way that I wanted to. There's a lot that went into it, you know? So I'm just not trying to give it up because somebody else wants me to be somewhere. And I know that might sound kind of selfish, but I think that when you're young, you should be a certain degree of selfish. Like, I'm not trying to hurt anyone in the process or do anything with like ill intentions. You know, I'm talking about being selfish in the sense of like, I'm trying to live my life, and I am gonna do that regardless of what other people want from me, expect from me, need from me. And again, this is situational, because I'm not saying that that applies to everybody, because I know that there are some people, for example, if your parents are elderly and they need help, they need someone to take care of them, and you're the only person to take care of them, and even though you're maybe young, I wouldn't think that the right thing to do necessarily would be like, well, you're on your own because I'm gonna go live my life the way that I want to and blah blah blah. Like, no, that's why it's dependent upon the person whose life it is and the situation that's at hand. And I just think that for me, I don't have any kids, I don't have anyone depending on me, I don't really, you know, I don't have anything. I've got this van and I've got me, and that's about it. And that's intentional. Like, I did that on purpose. It wasn't just because I didn't want anything else, or I don't know. So anyways, long story short, except not really short because I went off on a billion tangents, but what's new? We just hit a crossroads because they felt like maybe they really wanted me to be in one place, and I understood where they were coming from, and I didn't think that they were wrong for wanting that, but I couldn't give that to them. And they understood that I couldn't give that to them, but that didn't change the fact that that's what that person needed. So the relationship was just at this point where neither of us could give each other what the other person was wanting, and so things ended. They actually ended up breaking up with me because I cared about this person a lot, so I wasn't gonna be the one to do it. I was like, I don't know, maybe somehow we can figure it out. No, and they were right. You know, it wasn't gonna work with that dynamic. Like, one of us would have had to change, and at that point, like, nothing was gonna change. So there's that. Anyways, that whole scenario is kind of, I think, what most people imagine or like anticipate happening when they ask about dating and living in a van or living a mobile lifestyle. You know, they kind of, a lot of the questions are based on, how do people react to your lifestyle? How do other people treat you when they find out? Like, how do other people take it? How do other people manage to be okay with dating someone who lives this way? Like, you know, it's all about the other person. And I mean, obviously it happens. I've just told you of my real life situation where someone broke up with me because I live in a van and I wanted to travel all of the time. So it was just kind of, yeah, sometimes people break up with you because you live in a van. However, there's another side. There's another side to this. So here is story number 2. Different person that I was seeing at a completely different point in time. But again, before I even met this person, I'd been living in a car and I had been traveling. And so when we started hanging out, I told them, they were okay with it. No big deal, right? It's always a big deal. So they too were at a place where they lived in one city. They weren't planning on moving or doing anything really super different at any near point in the future. I was okay with that. So, okay, this story, I probably should have told this story first because this one happened first. So this one actually kind of does affect the one that I just told you. So just keep that in mind, I guess. So they wanted me to be around more often. And I was like, you know, I understand that and I like you. So it's not like I don't want to see you. So I think I could, you know, make that work. I could just be around a little bit more often. And at the same time, I was kind of like, well, maybe you could come travel with me a little bit, you know, because they had a full-time job and all that sort of thing. So it's kind of like, well, why don't we just do like some weekend trips, or whenever you get days off of work, we can just travel together. So compromise, right? So this person started coming with me, and they just kind of didn't, the outdoors just wasn't their environment. How about that? They weren't much of a hiker or a walker or a doer or anything. And I gave it a couple times. I was like, maybe it's just they're not having a good day. Maybe this is just really new to them. I don't know. I don't want to say that they like weren't fun to be around, because they were. Like, this person was a cool person, a really nice person, a caring person, a fun person. Like, obviously, I mean, I liked them for reasons. It just so happened that with like the travel aspect of my lifestyle, they just didn't really fit into that. But I mean, obviously we did other things like within the city that they lived in and hung out there, and like I had friends there and stuff. So it was like there was this whole other aspect to our relationship that was like totally fine. It was just the traveling part. So then I would be like, well, let's go on a weekend trip. And they would be like, well, maybe let's just go to this person's birthday party this weekend or something. I'd be like, okay, well, then maybe we'll go next weekend. And then next weekend it would be, well, let's just do this instead. And then kind of like in that time frame too, they had just kind of been saying things like, yeah, I mean, you're always here. Don't you think it would be a good idea? Like, wouldn't you be more comfortable? Wouldn't things just be better for you if you got an apartment, type of thing? And I was thinking about it, and I was like just kind of analyzing my life, and I was like, when's the last time I went somewhere? And I couldn't even remember like how long it had been. And I was like, well, what about this apartment thing? Because I had really actually started to like think about it, like seriously, like take it for real. I was like, what if I do get an apartment? And then I was like, what am I thinking? Like, who am I right now? Like, I had still had the same feelings that I had towards like renting and traveling and the life that I had wanted for myself. But like, while I was thinking about it, I was kind of like, I feel like I just felt like I wasn't paying attention. Like, I had fallen asleep and I was sleepwalking through my life, and then all of a sudden I woke up and I was like, what is going on? Like, what am I doing? Like, I worked really hard to live a specific kind of lifestyle that made me happy, and I'm not ready to give that up. But look at what I'm doing. Like, my actions say the complete opposite. Like, it looks like I'm about to give it up. And again, this is like no shade towards people who get apartments and don't travel. This is just like how I felt at that time, because it was something that I had so adamantly not wanted for myself, that the fact that that's where I was because of just the dialogue between me and this other person, I like couldn't believe it. So after just like thinking about all that and everything and realizing and coming to terms with like that's how I was feeling, and like that was my perception of what was happening, I was kind of like, I can't do that. In order for me to live my life in the way that makes me the happiest, I need to be outside. I need to be doing things. Like, I just need to adventure. And I know that sounds hokey, you know, it does, but it's just so true. For me, it's not even about the destination. It's about the act of being out there, of going places. It's not about where I end up. It's the act of doing it. And sometimes that's a really hard concept for people who don't feel that way, which again is totally okay, but it's a hard concept for other people to understand. So it was just this relationship dynamic where the other person didn't understand me, didn't know where I was coming from, didn't like the fact that I wasn't willing to stop doing that stuff, traveling. And so it just created a lot of tension. And you know, talking about it, it's like logically it makes sense. Okay, like you guys are different people, you want different things in your lives, bye. Part ways. But obviously there's emotions involved and attachment and all of this stuff, so it wasn't like super easy. And that was a situation that I kind of tried to hold on to for a little bit, and so I did compromise myself in the process a little, because I stayed in one place longer. Even after I had like shaken myself and been like, what are you doing? Stop it. Like, no. So anyways, I tried it for a little bit longer, and it just, again, I found myself in the same situation where I was like, I can't stay here. I can't live in one city. And that's not to say that I never will, you know. It's just who I am right now. It's who I was then. And I mean, even who I was then versus who I am now is a little bit different, and that's normal. So I can't speak for future Alexandria when I say that, like, I will never want to live in one city or whatever. I think that eventually I might, and that's fine. But as of right now, and the person who I was then, like when I'm talking about this all happening, it just wasn't for me. So this time, in this second relationship, I ended up breaking things off with the other person. And so it's kind of like I would say that I dumped someone because I live in a van and because I travel. So it's just kind of funny that, like, I swear, like 95% of the time, people are always curious about the situation or how the person who's not living in the van is going to take things and how they handle things and how they see things and how they feel. But the person living in a van or living a mobile lifestyle, you know, sometimes there are situations where you have to break up with people too. And in this case, it was pretty much because I wanted to keep living in a van and I wanted to keep traveling. Anyway, so how this second story kind of relates to the first story is I feel like at one point in time, I kind of had compromised myself a little bit in the sense that, like, someone else wanted me to live a certain kind of way, and because I cared about them, I put aside things that were important to me for the sake of, like, this other person, you know, to make them happy. So after that, I had just kind of made a promise to myself that I was like, I am never going to make an important life decision based on another person, like a person that I'm dating or something like that. Like, it has to come from me. It has to be for me, and I have to really think about it. And because in that scenario, like, they had kind of made the decision for me, but I didn't stop them, you know, so I'm not putting any blame on them. I'm not saying it's like their fault that I stopped traveling or whatever. It was mine, as, like, I think it was like just a mutual thing. My point is that I made a promise to myself that after that, I was never going to make another decision about my life and how I'm going to live my life based on another person or another person's thoughts and opinions or whatever. And obviously, this is very situational, of course. You have to take into consideration, like, the feelings of your friends and your family. I mean, to an extent, of course. So that's very general, but I know what that means to me, and I did make myself that promise. So then in the second situation, which was the first story that I told, that's kind of why when the person I was dating was kind of like, hey, I really would want you to be around more often, and they kind of started to get there. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not gonna happen. Been down that road. I'm not ready to stop doing what I'm doing, so if you're not okay with that, then yeah. So all in all, like, I could really say that, like, I've been broken up with because I live in a van, but I've also broken up with someone because I live in a van. So I don't know, dating and living in a van, again, I still think no matter what, even after telling you guys the stories and, like, going over it and everything, I don't think it's really any different than relationships if you don't live in a van or you don't travel. I mean, you just have to be on the same page, and you have to take care of yourself and make sure that, like, you know what's important to you and you know what makes you happy. And then of course there's discussions and compromises and changes and growing together involved, but you can't just completely sacrifice yourself for someone else's happiness or at the cost of your happiness, if that makes sense. And that's how I think that it just applies to, like, all relationships in general. I guess that's all I have to say about dating and living in a van or living a travel lifestyle or whatever, is that it's got its own complications and it's weird, but it is what it is. And I mean, I think that just kind of describes dating. So I've already gone off on enough tangents. I'ma stop. I will see you guys next time.